Alright, so today we're going to go over imperialism and nationalism and try to explain and expand issues surrounding both, as well as how it continues to affect us today. What is imperialism? It is a policy of extending a country's power and influence through diplomacy or military force. What is nationalism? Nationalism is exalting one nation above all others and placing primary emphasis on promotion of its culture and interests as opposed to those other nations. Example of this would be the United States taking over Guam. When Guam became a U.S. territory, much of the American ideologies and ways of life were adopted as a result of becoming a territory, which resulted in much of the island to be lost or forgotten, ultimately mean to us as a territory of the U.S.
So imperialism was initially, and in some cases still is, considered a good thing. It meant improving and advancing its people, technology, and resources. The acquisition of lands can increase natural resources and strengthen influence in world trade and affairs. However, in more modern times, the cons of imperialism seemingly outweigh the pros. Despite pros such as this, imperialism may never be justified because it causes economic greed. A country involving themselves with another country causes social turmoil and rebellion. A quote from the selected works of Mao Zedong says, "Only when imperialism is eliminated can peace prevail." Some positive effects of imperialism include bringing opportunities for an improved lifestyle, changing laws in order to grant more freedom and rights, and exchanging goods and technology for advancement. The negative effects of imperialism are slavery, depopulation, violence against the indigenous people, assimilation, which results in the loss of some indigenous cultures, conflict between ethnic groups and colonized countries, and in some cases, political repression and authoritarian rule. The role imperialism and nationalism played on the development of the First World. Imperialism helped the First World spread and gain power economically, and the labor done by the indigenous people gave way for the First World to reap the benefits. Elements of today's imperialism include capitalist accumulation or globalization, domination of finance, trade and investment, capitalism, technology and science, military power, and ideological control. Finally, some examples of modern or recent imperialism can include the United States annexation of Hawaii in 1896 and Great Britain's colonization of South America in the early 1800s.
Old imperialism relied heavily on force, militarism, and weapons. It was an obvious and often quick control of another country. New imperialism can be more subtle and gradual. It often uses technology, credit, trade, development, modernization, for example, the introduction of Western companies and Western lifestyles. This, like many other images on Google, implied that the fault was totally caused by outside foreign powers, for example, pollution or exploration. But some of the fault was by faulty domestic decisions. We see this in our textbook when talking about how the agriculture base was destroyed partly by the local government trying to keep the price of food artificially low.
This world lacks compassion, which is basically why imperialism exists in the first place, right? So there are people out there, the leaders of the first world, who forget that the people who work for them are people. And now let's try to relate imperialism and nationalism to something you may already be familiar with from your middle school science class. So, imperialism is basically the human equivalent of a symbiotic relationship that animals have. Now, if you don't remember symbiotic relationships, there's mutualism, commensalism, and parasitism, to name a few. Now, with me saying that, you probably already know where I'm going with this. So, animals are able to live in harmony with mutualism, or quid pro quo, you do something for me, I do something for you, and commensalism, which is one benefits and the other one remains unaffected, unharmed. But The United States government, for example, is kind of related to parasitism the most, because they're going to third world countries, taking everything that they have and giving them nothing in return. And that sounds really familiar, doesn't it? Now, you may be wondering, Shania, why are you relating imperialism to something that animals do? And that's because if you think about the behavior that is happening, you can't change animal behavior. Even though we're humans, this is animal behavior. And if you look at imperialism and how strong it's gotten over the years and how people have just learned to live with it, it's kind of sad to think that this is something that might last forever because it's become a lifestyle.
Thanks for watching.